All right, good afternoon, everybody. Event Trader here. Just going to take a look at the week ahead for anybody that wants to follow along. I posted this at 15:06. Take a look at some of the names that will be reporting next week as well, and get you caught up on what some of the bigger events, at least on the calendar, are. Obviously, we are always ripe for some headline gyrations, as we saw today. Still think that had just a little bit more to do with the options expiration than anything else. As far as that situation goes, we'll certainly be watching next week to see if the Chinese delegation will change their mind and come back out. Personally, I didn't think that it was a big deal that they were going to visit the farmers. I thought the idea that the U.S. held off on implementing tariffs on 400 products today really carried more weight than any speculation about the Chinese delegation leaving early at all or anything along those lines. Certainly President Trump did throw some cold water on the idea of a smaller deal getting done. But as Brett and I were talking about in our Sentiment and Flow show, and he brought it back around today too, the main expectations, as we know, is that there will be no deal done, and a lot of people, actually, the highest expectation in that Bank of America fund manager survey was pointing towards this being the new normal. So I don't think that the idea of a Chinese delegation not going out to visit farmers or leaving early, presumably, I don't know what the schedule was. I don't think anybody else knew. Shouldn't weigh as much on the markets, but we obviously were ripe for a little bit of a shakeout. We've been talking a lot about how there hasn't been too many buyers above this 3,000 level. And that was made evident today, but again, a little tougher to read into that given that options expiration. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the key themes that we should be on the lookout for next week. And starting off with U.S. economic data, we know that the centers are catching all the headlines, but really the centrists in the Fed have basically been saying we're on a meeting-to-meeting basis and following the data, and that's why the Fed data should take priority over the Fed speak that's going to be going on next week. Some of the bigger reports starts Monday morning, and we're just going to go off the U.S. numbers here, but we get that preliminary service and PMI numbers for the U.S. at 9:45 a.m. on Monday morning. Tuesday, we get some housing price data with both the Case-Shiller and FHFA housing price reports out. And Wednesday, we get the new home sales. But really, the biggest data set for the markets will come on Friday morning at that 8:30 a.m. time frame. That's when we get the PCE number, and you heard a number of officials reiterate that this was the key interest rate for them to follow. And we'll also get income and spending at that point, as well as durable goods orders. So Friday at 8:30 a.m. is really the big moment for that econ data, but obviously we'll be following the preliminary PMI numbers too. Fed speak, pretty busy calendar next week for the Fed speakers. I highlighted the name, which I thought were the key ones below. I didn't highlight the dissenters, the people that spoke today. That would include Clarida. Who else spoke today? Bullard. Rosengren spoke today. Kaplan spoke today. So Williams is the one that I'm most interested in. He'll be speaking on Monday morning. He's, of course, the New York Fed president, and they handle most of these repo operations. So curious to see his insight into that situation. Then moving on, we got earnings and guidance, and not a busy week for earnings, but some notable names, particularly on the retail consumer side, with Nike, ASNA, KBH, KB Homes, of course, CarMax, KMX, and Conagra CAG, as well as some nice tech names there with Jabil, JBL, and Micron arguably being the biggest. Like Micron and Nike would be the two that I'm most interested in. Again, August end dates, so that certainly will provide a little bit more color going into the Q3. earnings season, which is around the corner. And with that in mind, too, we want to keep an eye out for pre-announcements. Certainly the steel names have gotten us off to a shaky start on that front. And then the August end dates with that FedEx guidance has really rattled some of the thoughts about the global economy and how some of these multinational corps might be faring, and that could make them a weaker earnings candidate going in. And then finally, for the key themes preliminary PMIs, we discussed the U.S. number. But before we even get that number, we'll be given a couple names from Asia on Sunday night with Australia and Japan. Japan, by the way, is closed on Monday. And then we get the European figures out early Monday morning before we culminate in with the U.S. set at 9:45 a.m. So, taking a look, I'm going to go through the U.S. macro, international, and then corporate, and then I'll circle back around to the earnings. We'll take a look at some of those charts. U.S. macro, pretty much run down the list here, but Monday, pretty interesting day with that preliminary PMI number. Then Williams and Bullard will also be speaking again, but again, he spoke today and laid out his case for why he dissented for a 50 basis point cut. Nothing really new there. Tuesday, again, the housing price data, as well as September consumer confidence, key survey number. I should have included that in. Sorry for that overlook up top. Wednesday, we get the MBA mortgage application index, of course, as well as some new home sales numbers, EIA crude inventories, and then Fed's Charles Evans speaks, as well as Esther George, one of the dissenters. We have not heard from her yet, so curious as to her take, but I think we have a fair idea on why she dissented. Thursday, we got the advanced trade in international goods. Q2 GDP, this is the third estimate, so really this is just some fine-tuning by the Bureau, so I'm not looking for a big impact on markets. August pending home sales, nat gas, and then Clarida and Kaplan speak, but we already heard from them today. And then, of course, Friday with the big data. We also have, which is income and spending and PC prices. We also have the September University of Michigan sentiment number going on, as well as Fed's Harker speaking too. So, moving on to the international side, relatively quiet week. We talked about the PMI numbers there, and that's the big items for me. Japan, of course, is closed on Monday, and we got Draghi speaking also on Monday. I'd expect him to just kind of reiterate comments that he made a week and a half ago. Tuesday, Bank of Japan's Kuroda speaking, and we get the German IFO business survey, so I get a little bit of a look into the business climate there. Mexico's CPI numbers, just curious to see what's going on. And the Bank of Japan minutes, which we'll get a little bit of further insight into their thoughts around some of this negative interest rate philosophy there. Wednesday, Bank of Japan core CPI numbers, as well as the German GfK consumer survey. So as we can see, some key sentiment numbers from Germany coming out. Thursday, Germany import prices, the ECB economic bulletin, and Eurozone money supply and private loans out. Draghi will speak again, as will the Bank of England's Carney on Thursday. And then we get the UK GfK consumer survey with the Mexico interest rate decision as well. Later on in the night, we'll get China industrial profits. Then, moving on to Friday, French consumer spending and CPI numbers, and a 10-year bond auction out of Italy. Finally, corporate and conferences, looking under that. BABA Investor Day on Monday. So, quick look at the BABA chart here. All right, so sorry about that. So we got BABA here. They got a 2-day investor meeting, obviously looking at some of the different monetization and cloud growth there. Babo is looking at a potential breakout, so want to see some positive commentary in order to facilitate that breakout. Holding above 177 will obviously be key. Some other conferences in note: Barclays European Payment and FinTech Conference, Johnson Rice Energy, obviously energy names in focus, and Stevens is a bank forum. Tuesday, Bank of America Merrill Lynch has a financial conference, as well as Goldman Sachs with the future of esports. Curious to see that. Ladenburg Thalmann with the healthcare conference, and JP Morgan with emerging markets. Wednesday, we got a Jefferies base metals conference kicking off, as well as Credit Suisse retail foods, and a BBY analyst day. So obviously one that's been impacted by tariffs, so curious to see what they have to say. Thursday, Jefferies small to mid cap summary starts off in KBC Healthcare. Not sure who KBC is, but any of these healthcare names we want to watch. And then finally, RBC's got their global tower and wireless. So taking a look at some of the earners, Monday morning we get that ASNA retail shop. Damon is involved with that from 20 cents. So I'll be curious to see his thoughts around it, but any sort of a surprise report here could really drive that stock higher. As we can see, it's just kind of sitting around below 1 at the moment. Other names to watch: AutoZone, AZO, just one of the best charts around. We'll pull that up on a weekly here. And as you can see, trying to test those all-time highs that it set back after its last earnings report, and that would be the 1180 area. So that's going to be the key watch there. Taking a look at some of the other names of interest: CarMax, KMX. This had been a big winner earlier in the year, but we're seeing that some of that rally peter out a little bit as it finds some resistance around this 90 level. So any failure to provide a big beat and raise could lead to a little bit of selling pressure around that one. Next up, we've got the equipment play for the semis, and that's Jabil, JBL. So this will give us some read into the health of the economy, of the semiconductor space. JBL been running in resistance at this 32 area, as you can see in the chart here. So that's going to be the key one to watch. We also have NEO, which has just been beaten down, has been holding around this 3 level. So any sort of surprise, though, I would expect to see some buyers come in. Cintas is next up, CTAS. Again, weaker jobs market out there from what we've been seeing, and obviously they do the uniforms for the job market, so it's considered a little bit of a read on that space. And as you can see, it's been losing some of its luster, but sitting at key support levels at that 240 area. And then one of the big ones is Nike, NKE, which is sitting right around that 88-90 area. We want to see the health of the consumer there for this high-end retailer. They have moved a lot of their sourcing out to Vietnam, so not expecting that to be an issue. Some names of note for Wednesday: we got Worthington sitting right on its 200-day and 50-day moving average at 37.52. We also got KB Homes, and home builders have just been really strong. Scott's been all over this story. So we'll get a nice retail report from one of them, or earnings report from one of them here, KBH, which is trying to break out, as we can see. If you take a look at it on the weekly, it's coming in at some key resistance level with that 37.38 level set back in the beginning of 2018 as the key area. And then finally, moving on to Thursday, nice staple report from Conagra. Give us a little bit of insight there. This one's been bouncing back ever since that big sell-off in late 2018. And we will also get one of the key semi reports with Micron, which again is another one that has been busting out, as you can see on the weekly here. Keeping an eye obviously on DRAM pricing and NAND pricing, as this will really set the tone for earnings for the semiconductors going into Q3. So that is going to do it for me. I will be posting this audio segment, and if there's any questions, by all means, feel free to jump in and fire away any questions, and I'll answer them as I can. Hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.